Okay, so I guess we can just go around and introduce ourselves again and then get started. So I'm Rivka Jensen.
I'm Michelle Hawks.
I'm Caitlin Whiteman.
Anna Lochran.
Paige Grant.
And Keisha Aguilar.
Perfect. All right, so the first question that it kind of gives us to discuss is, having completed the book, how has your understanding and perception increased on the process of international policy and law? I can start us off. So I thought it was really insightful in the book how he talked about, like, when he got to the conference, one of the first speeches that he gave was about how even though the things that are said there don't write into a law right then, it still has a lot of influence and a lot of power into what creates our laws in all of the countries that, like, because this is the UN that the forum was, and so it talked about how, like, what they are saying there has a lot of influence and usually becomes a law through the back door. And so I thought that was really insightful because I kind of had the same mentality of the UN's kind of separate, and so it doesn't really matter what they say at those things because that's not our government. That's just kind of a club, I guess, was my mindset. And so that was insightful to hear that it really does matter what's being said there, because that's what initiates and gets thoughts into the minds of our government and our legislators. And um, laws do come from those, but it's not in the same means of how our other laws go through that process. Like the picture of, like, how bills and laws come to pass, like this kind of surpasses us from, like, a different angle. So I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, sorry, I'll go ahead just because my thoughts were kind of the same as yours. So I knew that the UN created policies, but I just kind of thought, well, they're not the government, you know. And so I didn't realize, like, it seemed like a lot of others at the conference in Istanbul also thought that the UN, like, didn't have a lot of teeth, or they couldn't sink their teeth into a lot of the policies. But they actually do make a widespread impact. And then the other thing I thought of was just how that woman was talking to Richard Wilkins about Alva Myrtle, and how a lot of the influence, like, that a person's influence can be felt through power and through having a lot of money. So that really pushes a lot of policies.
Yeah, I thought the Alva Myrtle lady, she sounds horrifying. Like, after reading about the things that she was, like, pushing for, that was, like, scary to hear that she was someone in government that was, like, making things happen. But that was a side note. Does anyone else want to add anything on that thought, or, like, the understanding or the perception of how government and like how international policies and law come into play?
My answer is the same pretty much as yours and Michelle's, in that, governments are influenced by...
Right. So I think it was overall insightful. Because
Hello?
Yeah.
anything you want to add? Okay.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Oh, no, you're good.
I was just saying that governments are influenced by policymakers and lawmakers, as well as just other governments and organizations. So it's really important to understand what you're saying, and that you do have an influence, even if it doesn't come into play in your own country or organization. So just kind of what you guys said.
That's great. No, thank you. Does anyone else want to add anything?
I just was thinking that it's interesting, you know, it might not come into play in your specific country, but it could, and I feel like that's kind of a threatening thing to not be knowledgeable about, you know, and I feel really bad that I initially blew off, you know, this, the UN and everything, because I feel like if they were to make a decision that impacted our country, I think it would totally take me, you know, off guard a little bit, and so I feel like, I don't know, I just feel like that needs to be given a little bit more attention because it could still affect us. It doesn't always, but it could. So.
A thought. Oh, were you about to say something?
Nope.
Oh, okay. A thought that I had about it was kind of a worrisome because I feel like maybe a lot of people are like us and they just didn't realize how much influence the UN has. And then because whenever he gave that speech, like whenever Richard gave the speech about how much influence the UN has and how actually like laws and things actually can come from the things that are spoken about there. Remember how the lady that was part of like the women's coalition or something like that, how she was like really angry with him afterwards? Like it seemed like she was almost angry that he like helped people realize that, because it seems like they kind of were like one of the forerunners of like UN conventions, and like maybe he liked that other people weren't, like other groups weren't aware that they had so much grip there, because it was like letting them steamroll a lot of their policies. I don't know, is that a thought that anyone else had, or was that?
I kind of had the same thought. I was just like, oh, he's bringing to light something that she did, just like, no, I just want everyone to be oblivious so I can do what I want and get things that I want done.
Yeah. So I feel like that's worrisome, to like know that, and then to know that there's groups that are there like that really aren't representing the mass. Like that women's feminist group, like their opinions they're not like reflecting, I feel like, what mass women feel. And so it was kind of worrisome to hear that there's people like that there that do know how impactful it is, but they're going about it, they're the prominent figures there. And so I felt like that was kind of eye-opening to know that there's more going on than what we're aware of. So does anyone else want to add anything, or do you want to move on to the next question? Okay. Perfect. Then we'll move on. What role did you see the Lord playing in Professor Wilkins' efforts to advocate for the families of the world? And what lessons did you learn for your own efforts?
One thought that I had was just kind of going off of what you just said. I think that there's a lot of people that are involved who are trying to manipulate the system and push something that they don't want everybody else to know about, just kind of push their own agenda without it being the general consensus of the population and of the people. And that's going to continue to happen unless, more people speak up and more people, try to defend the family, specifically, for what we're talking about in this second question. I think that Brother Wilkins' efforts are blessed in the sense that the maybe minority, or I guess another opinion, is being represented. And I think that there's probably a lot of people that, haven't spoken up or haven't said anything that really agree with him. And so I think that he's had the ability to touch the lives of a lot of people because he spoke up. And I think that the Lord will hold him guiltless, for being an advocate. I think that that's really comforting to have that clean conscience, and I feel like he probably has that. So those are just some of my thoughts.
No, that's a great thought. That hadn't even crossed my mind of that perspective of it. I was thinking, in my head, on just a different plane. So that was like great to hear that perspective. My thought on it was stuff like Richard would be like very prepared for everything that he went to, and then the things that he didn't have control over, like those women pulling in extra speakers so that they could kind of snub his time out and things like that. Those things that he didn't have control over, the Lord took care of, and like the Lord would make sure that someone else was there that day that would speak up and say that this hasn't been a very just conference, and all these women have like forced out other speakers so that he would get the chance to have his 4 minutes and speak and things like that. Like I just noticed, like he did all that he could on his part, and then the Lord came through on the other parts and made the way possible for him to share and advocate. And I thought that was cool to see that the Lord made it work for him. Like the Lord rewarded his efforts and supported him, and even in those times where it was out of his control, I thought that was cool to see.
Yeah. I think when we show the Lord that we have a willing heart, He takes care of the rest. When we put Him first, all things shall be added unto us, and all of those other things that were out of His control, He just took care of. The Lord's all powerful. Nobody's going to get in His way. If He wants something to happen, it's going to happen, regardless of the women's best efforts to snub His speaking time, and whatnot. The Lord is definitely going to allow His servants to speak up when He wants them to. So.
Yeah, I love what you said about him having a clear conscience at the end of the day, because he did all that he could to advocate for the Lord. I thought that was a great comment. Does anyone else want to add anything?
Yeah, I do. Going along with what you said, basically, is that just everything kind of fell into place, down to his very look, his beard, and his outfit. It all went towards, and helped him in his journey to get through this convention, or whatever they're calling it. And basically the lesson that I wrote down that was learned is that if you have righteousness in your cause, then Heavenly Father will be your biggest supporter, and your cause will make a difference. And that, like as the examples you gave, he was presented with challenges that were very difficult to overcome, but they were there for a reason. They were there, and he was able to prove himself to everybody else, and to prove his knowledge and his beliefs, and effectively. So, yeah, everything just kind of fell into place.
I love that. I agree. Hannah, were you about to say something?
I can. Sorry, I'm sick right now, so I'm not talking a lot. I just think throughout the whole book, I just showed how Heavenly Father kind of placed him in these situations, in these opportunities to be an advocate, even though it wasn't really his normal thing. I mean, I don't know. Is that what he was saying in the beginning? He was this isn't really what he does, but then he kind of gradually went more and more towards just fighting for just families in general, and just
yeah, exactly.
So it's just interesting how it just came about, and it was because of that. And that's the same with us, because it said it's what did you learn from your own efforts? The more education you get and the more you learn, then you're gonna be pushed towards that probably, or towards what you need to be doing. And that's what he was supposed to do. And it worked for him. That's all.
That's perfect. It kind of reminds me of how he said, he's this whole experience was me getting pushed out of my comfort zone over and over and over, and that's the only way I could have grown, was being pushed out of it. I think that's interesting to hear, because I think sometimes, I know for me, I want to stay in my comfort zone.
I had something to add too. Oh, I was just thinking about the ways that all the ways throughout the book that he was involved, and I think this kind of goes along with what you just said, Rivka, about being pushed out of your comfort zone. The Lord, he was prompted by the Spirit several times that he should go, until he just said, okay, I just need to go. And he, even though it wasn't something he wanted to do, he knew that the Lord wanted him to do it. And some of the other things I wrote down were how Paige mentioned even his appearance. It says after, when he got home, he knew that his appearance might have been what afforded him the opportunity, and so he said prayers to thank Heavenly Father for that. And then also I thought it was interesting that he kept saying things like he knew he would be one of the 10 NGO representatives to speak at the first committee meeting. And I just kept thinking, well, the only way he can know that and be so sure of himself is if, you know, it was confirmed to him by the Spirit. And so that just shows that he was living in a way to have the Spirit with him, and Heavenly Father was definitely there throughout that. And another thing was that when Bradley was looking for the record from 1949, he said there were volumes of the book said there were volumes of documents, but the most amazing thing happened. The first volume that Bradley picked up fell open to the page where the definition was found. So that right there is, you know, I think a tender mercy from the Lord, and just showing support for their cause and kind of reaffirmation of you're doing what you need to do. And I just like how people have said that he did everything he can, and then the Lord took care of the rest. Sorry, this is a really long comment. So then what I learned was kind of what you guys already said, but then also I was just thinking about how after these 2 weeks of physical and mental and emotional exertion, he was able to go to the mosque, and then he just got spiritually nourished from, you know, the Tree of Life experience. But just after we go through our trials, then I don't know, I just thought if we're doing all we can to defend the family, then the Lord will help us and boost us up when we need it and bless us. So that was it.
I love that. Thank you.
Can I add something real quick? Something that I stood out to me was when he had that 4 hour of writing right before the big speech, and he said those women were there and they were constantly, and he couldn't get any work done. That it just took a simple call to his wife and to know that she was praying for him, and he could just picture her praying, and just the simple fact of that, he was able to block everything out, and he was actually able to get something written. And so, like, I just thought, I was like, you know, we have basically the adversary screaming at us, you know, constantly trying to drown us out, trying to distract us. But if we just take that moment to just sit there and pray or think of the Lord, that it will all become quiet and we can do what he wants us to do.
I love that, and that also kind of leads us to the next question about, like, supporting roles that others played for him. And, like, it was amazing for me to see, like, how amazing his wife was. Like, it made me kind of feel like a crummy wife, because every time you talked to her, she was so uplifting and motivating, and was, like, spewing out spiritual things the whole time. Like, she was an anchor. It was amazing. And so I think she definitely was a supporting role for him, and him being able to do what he did, and probably even preparing him for that. She's the one that pushed him to go and was like, I think it'd be right for you to go, but you obviously have to pray about it, but I think it'd be great. You know, like, she was just very supportive, and I think that was great.
Yeah, I was gonna say that too, because it like led into it. But I think she like showed like the biggest support, and I think it's just important because it's like his life is an example of what he is like teaching others, I guess. Does that make sense? But I just thought his wife. Can you hear me? I'm using my hotspot, so I don't even know if anybody can like understand me. Is it good?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Sorry, and then I think we lost Rivka. Hopefully she'll get back. But yeah. So yeah, I just thought it was interesting. It showed a great example. Okay, someone else can go.
Are we on the third question now?
Yes, we're on the third question.
Okay, I was like, it really feels like we're okay. Basically, I'm going with what everybody else said, that his wife played a huge role And I said her presence was the epitome of why Richard could defend the family so fiercely, because she supported him through love and encouragement. Her strength and example is what defined his own traditional family. And then I also said that his friend Susan, and the fact that she had such absolute faith in his ability and in his knowledge, and apparently I assume his way of life, which reflected this, traditional family, that she just had such faith in him, and that faith just translated through the whole experience. So.
I agree. I like that you brought up the friend Susan. I think you're right that she was a good influence. Like, she was always just that, you're doing great, like that, you're doing so great, and just super supportive of him, and she had faith in him from the beginning that he was the right person for the job. And I think that was a good thought, that Susan was one of the supporting advocates, I guess, for him, for supporting roles.
Yeah, I thought of Susan and the wife too as the main two people that really helped him, and then also just the comment that the Arab delegate made, where he said, "Where have you been?" Because I think that comment seemed to really stick with Richard even after even after time had passed and he was back at BYU and stuff like that. But to answer the last part of that question, why is it important to recognize this? I was just thinking of, the support and help he got from others really helped him to go through that. Well, of course, with the Lord, too. I think he's our biggest advocate. But the Advocacy Society, the Child and Family Advocacy Society at BYUI has a Facebook page. We kind of read about that in one of the things this week, or we will. I don't remember. But and then if you join the page, people often share advocacy moments that help inspire and uplift others. So I think it's important for us to realize to accept support and help from others, and then also offer it and give a word of encouragement to people who maybe are standing up for something that's difficult.
I like what you said, Michelle. I had an opportunity the other week. My sister posted something on Facebook, just like, I don't know, your run-of-the-mill, like, she just posted a scripture testifying of the family and why it's important and stuff like that. And she had a girl from our high school just go on her post and rip it apart, kind of a thing. But it was really cool afterwards to see, because my husband and I went on and each added our testimony. We didn't try to really contend with this girl that had kind of ripped apart the post. We just wanted to add our testimony to it and add our beliefs instead of being contentious, because we didn't feel like that was that was good. But we added our testimonies, and then it was so fun to watch as so many other members did the same thing, whether it was missionaries that had served in the ward, or the bishop of our ward, or just a friend from EFY, or something like that. There were so many people that came on and all posted together, and I just thought that was a really neat experience, and even though it didn't come without opposition, how many people had the opportunity to share their testimony because my sister took the opportunity to share hers first, and so I just think I connected that with what you just said, Michelle, about how the man asked Brother Wilkins, where have you been, this whole time? And I just think that there's so many people that maybe are too shy or embarrassed or scared to testify, to stand up for what they believe in, but it just takes one person to get the ball rolling, and I think that there would be a pretty big impact. So I just think you never know. You never know who you might influence.
That's a really good comment, and I like that you had like that just happened the other day. So thanks for sharing that too.
Yeah.
Does anyone else want to add anything? Okay. The next question is, what are some consequences and risks of minimizing or eliminating family and religion from public policy? I think I think a great quote to go for the answer of this is, I might have said this last week, but I don't know. But the prophet, I can't remember. I think it was President Kimball, was at a some newsman asked him. He's like, "Why does your church focus so much on families when there's so many bigger problems in the world, bigger issues?" And his response was, "Because those bigger problems and those bigger issues start within the family." He's like, "It's all because someone at home." Because somewhere at someone's home, their family life was messed up, and it trickled into a bigger problem. And I don't think he answered exactly like that, but that was like the gist of it. Was it starts with the family. Bigger problems start at home with the family. And I think if we eliminate family and religion from public policy, then we're creating more problems. Like we read about how this lady, the Ava lady that the lady that was telling Richard all about this one woman, this Ava woman that back in the day, had all these crazy policies that she implemented and it messed everything up. And then that lady, she read the stories from the kids. Like that woman, sorry, the lady read the books that Ava's kids wrote about Ava, and Ava was the crazy lady, and both of the kids didn't like their mom, and both of the kids had a bad childhood, and both of the kids, like it messed up their family life, and it affected them. And even though Ava didn't feel like families were important, and so I feel like it shows I'm sorry, I feel like this sounds so confusing, but I feel like if we all have the misconception of taking family and religion out of it and not protecting those units, then more problems will arise that we haven't even thought of yet, because families and religion are the ones that keep everything together and unified and happy in this crazy world that we live in. And so I think to take that out and to lose focus on what the point is of this life would be catastrophic. But that was my thought. It was kind of long. Sorry. Does anyone else want to add anything?
I do. Going off of what you said, my thought just was that the family unit is not only the central unit in eternity and in our gospel, but I would argue it's also the central unit of every society. No society can exist without a family, as a husband and wife and their children, because that's what, that's how our population's created, that's how our population grows, and that unit is so distinct from every other unit in society. And I just think that we have forgotten that as a whole, with passing the law to legalize homosexuality. We're changing the definition of the family, we're changing the definition of marriage, but in the same vein we're not. We're just adding to it, but I don't know what I'm trying to say. I guess I'm just trying to say the family is, set apart and defined, by its ability to, procreate, to create children, to contribute to society, and yet we're adding these other groups to this, and we're giving them this title, and yet they don't meet the qualifications, but we're not bothering to change the qualifications. And so I think it's going to have so many effects that might not all come at once, but will happen in time. We're basically dissolving this family unit by, completely ignoring what we've said in the past to set the family unit apart. And I think that to take that away would be to take away, like Rivka said, like create so many problems because all of these problems have to start somewhere. We've talked in lessons before this one about how like it starts on an individual level and it grows from there. And I think that that's the same with all the big problems that we see in the world. They all start on a very individual and family level. And so if we're desecrating the family and what holds it sacred and the standards that we have placed with that, then of course we're going to see all of these bigger problems arise. Like, what do you think's going to happen? I feel like those two are so connected, but nobody sees that. And so I think that's where the problem lies. I don't think any of that made sense, but I hope that, I don't know, part of it did.
It did. Thank you. No, I 100% agree. Does anyone else want to add anything to this?
Sorry, she woke up. Sorry, I missed the last part of what you said, Caitlin, but something that you had said earlier reminded me of, I wrote down a few comments instead of actually writing down stuff in my own word. I mean, a few quotes, because I feel like I don't say them as well. Some of the things that you said, we won't foresee these problems until the future. And in, I think it's page 68, Professor Wilkins was warning the people at the conference or the committee meeting, be careful, he told them, before you discard thousands of years of traditions. Do not do it quickly or without great care. The family is the basic unit of society. It is central to our communities. He said, if our problems are to be solved, if they are to be solved in the families of the world, do not adopt policies which will lead to the disintegration of our families. And he made the comment earlier that the policies and things that are being made at the UN directly affect the families. So we really shouldn't take the family out of them. And then on another page, he said that the family was more than just something to preserve. It was the only place where the problems of society could be successfully addressed. And I don't remember who spoke before Caitlin, but sorry, I'm trying to remember who it was, but you said something. Okay, yeah, you said something that went along with that perfectly. Those were my thoughts. Oh, and plus, of course, the quote from the proclamation that warns about the disintegration of the family. And, it'll bring on calamities foretold and stuff like that.
That's perfect. Does anyone else want to add anything to go with that?
I do. Going off of what Caitlin said, she really got me thinking about the word family and how for hundreds of years you could have a conversation, refer to your family, and the other person would think husband, wife, and children. And that how in the last less than 100 years, something has polluted that definition. When somebody says family, you think, oh, well, what's it made up of? It's no longer clear. As I said, it's been polluted. And we have had to change the word family to traditional family to mean what has for hundreds of years meant one thing. And I think back in the book where they were changing the brackets and they wanted to put in the word traditional in front of family or whatever, or put in traditional family. But instead of that, they went for the definition of it, which was a father, a mother, and their children. And I think that one of the reasons it wasn't wise to put traditional family is that then that term or phrase would then be polluted just in order for the others to get their say, by making it a more open term like the word family is now. So that was my thought off of her thing, but I'm just going to quickly read what I wrote down for this. It's just like a short list, sort of. Minimizing or eliminating family and religion in public policies means that you are giving society the tools to undermine the traditional family. You are making it easier for society to justify new lifestyles and choices which naturally diminish the traditional family. By making it public policy, you are making abortions and same-sex marriages the social norm and turning the traditional family into a social outcast. You are strengthening government influences in families by making it harder for parents to experience parenthood. And so, that's all.
That's great. No, I thank you for saying that. I love that, and it kind of all of your comments went hand in hand with Caitlin and Michelle's, and that was perfect. Thank you.
I have one comment.
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry.
Yes.
Okay. So, a lady from my work, she attended that World Congress of Families last week, and they changed. I don't know when it's going to come to play or what they're doing with it, but it's no longer traditional family; it's the natural family. I don't know if we're going to start talking about that more in classes, but I thought that was really interesting, and how it's also a change. Like, I mean,
The organic.
I kind of like it more because it's like it's not traditional. It's like it's natural. It's biologically natural. So
That's
there
kind
are.
of a comeback to the whole traditional family definition. You know, I think, I don't know, I don't want to say it's like a slap in the face, but I feel like it kind of is just like, hello, you know, this is the natural way, this is the organic way, this is how it's supposed to be. Biologically, it makes sense, you know, just, I don't know, it just kind of has like a, well, duh connotation. I really like that.
I'm glad you brought that up. Thank you, Hannah.
No
Yeah,
problem.
I almost feel like you can make it a trend by like calling it the organic family, like. But no, that's interesting. I feel like I have mixed feelings about it. Like I'm sad that it has to even be said, but at the same time I like it. Like there's no disputing that. Cool. So last question is, unless someone else had something they wanted to add, the last question was, what do we think we can do about it? Does the author implicitly or explicitly make realistic suggestions for ordinary citizens as well as those in a position of power and influence, provide examples? I think Caitlin already kind of touched on this, on things that we can do about it. It's just opening our mouth. Like she talked about how her sister made a comment on Facebook and she just stood up and validated the comment. And I think those are like easy ways to do it, but they feel so hard. Like I know for me, I kind of have a hard time opening my mouth on social media and things that are so like it's such a conflict for other people in the world. So I feel like I always kind of have a rough time like setting my foot in the middle of it and just instead of staying quiet. But I think that's a great example of how we can be advocates. But does anyone else have any other ideas or responses to that question?
I was just kind of like not confused, but just like wondering what she meant by like implicit or explicitly making realistic. So like, was it direct that like the suggestion she made, or was it kind of like, oh, we should do something about it, but we don't know what? Is that what the question's asking? Like,
that's what my understanding of it was, but I don't know if that helps much. Yeah. So like well, did you have anything else you wanted to say?
Not really, because I don't really know the answer.
Yeah. Yeah, this one was tricky. I don't know if I did it right, but I'll just share what I thought. So implicitly, he didn't really say, we need to be like Captain Moroni and raise the title of liberty, but I think that's kind of, he shared one of the lessons that he learned in that, or, just that we can all be like Captain Moroni. That's, I think, was a hidden message. I don't know. But he also explicitly stated that the first grand choice is between comfort and growth, because the choice for growth means that we must make subsequent choices that make us uncomfortable. And so, to me, I took that as saying he was explicitly telling us look, you've just got to decide whether or not you're going to defend the family, and then once you make that choice, everything will come after. I don't know if that, yeah, that made more sense on paper and in my mind. So,
I thought it made sense. I feel like I agree with you. I think that it's really hard in this generation because, you know, in past generations with the saints and with like God's children, whenever hardship has kind of arose, they've been commanded to leave. You know, you see that with like the pioneers, with Nephi and Lehi and their family, or with, I don't know, just everybody. They just up and leave. And that's kind of been their way of handling it. But Heavenly Father has kind of asked us to stay and to, you know, defend Zion where we stand. And that's so hard. And that's really challenging because there's no escape from it. And I know we've talked about all of this in like past lessons, but I think particularly with the growth of media and the role that that plays in all of these decisions and influences, and in the defense of the family, I think it's particularly challenging because from my experience, people will say things online that they would never say to you in person. And they take on a tone of contention and rudeness and harshness that they would never say to your face. And that's really hard to give people the freedom to say things like that to you. It can be really hurtful. And so, you know, having to face that can be really, really challenging. And I think that that's kind of the root of the fear of advocating for the family, because it can be, I think there's a lot more at risk for us than there has been at any other generation. And so figuring out how to deal with that, I think, has been the biggest trial in this, you know, advocacy for that.
I agree. Thank you for sharing that. I do think it's interesting that we have a different dynamic in our current generation than past generations in regards to like scripture stories and things. Like they would leave, they get out of temptation's way and get out of harm's way, but we have to find a way to cope with it. And it kind of makes me think about, in regards to like suggestions that he kind of made, he talked about getting out of your comfort zone, and he talked about how like he couldn't have made any of those different. Sorry, my dog's like chewing on a bottle. One sec. He talked about like getting out of your comfort zone and how like he wouldn't have been able to make any of those differences if he had just stayed where he was comfortable. Like he had never been to that kind of a setting before. He wasn't an international attorney. He wasn't an expert in this field. Like everything he was doing was completely out of the norm for him. But he just kind of had to follow the Spirit and then prepare as much as he could, and then the Lord did the rest. And I think we kind of have to have the same mindset. Like I think we just have to prepare ourselves for as much as we can, and follow the Spirit. And I think part of that's recognizing what's a good forum to open our mouth. Like if it's just a contentious setting, then it's not worth it. Like when those women came in the room when he was writing his talk, like he had the 4 hours to write his speech, and those women were saying all these mean things and putting down the family and saying it was archaic and trying to get a rise out of them. He knew that wasn't the setting to rise to argue with them, because it would make a difference. Whereas if he's out in the forum, like that's a great place to state his argument. And so I think part of it is just knowing when the right time and place is to make a difference, and then making sure that we're speaking with love and speaking with love and speaking from the Spirit, and then just getting out of our comfort zone so that the Spirit can really work with us, and then we have that faith. I think those were kind of some implicit things that he taught. He never said go do that, but he, like, through his examples and through his stories, that's kind of what his testimony was saying for him. Or at least that's how I took it, of that we have to do those things in order to make differences sometimes.
I'll put my 2 cents in real quick. What I wrote down was this. We need to base our defending arguments on beliefs and values that are supported by our faith and proven through history to be beneficial to society. And this is based off of his answer to when they questioned him. They said, why do you do this? What is in it for you? Is this based on your political belief or is it based on faith? To which he says, I think it is best from a political perspective because history tells us and shows us that societies that recognize religious rights and parental rights that work to retain the values that religions teach, clearly those societies create more stable environments, basically. So keeping in mind history and faith and just that it has worked and that it will always continue to work.
That's perfect. Thank you, Paige. Does anyone want to add anything else? Or all right. Well, then I think that's all I had to share today. So if anyone has anything else they want to share, we can do that. But otherwise, should we plan on meeting next week at 2 o'clock again, Idaho time?
Sounds good.
Yeah, sounds good.
2 o'clock works for me. Just real quick before we forget, Rivka, do you want to do the summary, or just the summary real quick at the end, or?
Yeah, for sure. And then,
Sorry, I didn't know if you remembered. That's the only
no,
reason.
I forgot. So thank you. And so then you'll post the link onto the discussion board, right?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So basically, what I got, like, from what I'm understanding of how we're all feeling, is that forums like United Nations and groups like this that are, even though they're not direct public policy making places, still have large influence on the laws and the legislations that will get passed. And so it's important what's said there, and it's important like what's being advocated there. And it's important that, and so even though for us, even though we're not at a place like that, like Richard was, that we're preparing ourselves for at home and for our settings and our surroundings so that we can be advocates where we stand. We kind of talked about social media a little bit, and then we also kind of talked about how it's important that we're prepared and that we're praying and that we're spiritual and that we're listening to the Word and that we're and like Paige said, like that we're kind of having a bit of faith and as well as history, and we're informed. And then it's important who our supporting roles are. A lot of us talked about the spouse and how the wife made a big difference, and then the friend. And so I think for us, surrounding ourselves with people like that, I think we're all married, so our good spouses, and then friends, and then or not all of us, sorry, some of us, and then they're just good friends and supporting people in our lives. And then we talked about how losing religion or family from public policy will create catastrophes, as we're told by prophets. But do you guys feel like I missed anything, or is that kind of what we all?
That was great.
All right. Well, perfect. Then I think let's plan on reconvening next week at 2 o'clock Idaho time. Does anyone want to volunteer to be the host next week?
I can.
Perfect. All right. Well, then we'll see each other next week.
Bye, guys.
See you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.